Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel at Neiros Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Lamed Vav Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Lamed Hey Amid Beis on the very bottom line, Siman Reish Samach Gimel in middle of Sif Gimel, right by near the end of the line on the bottom line by the words Im Ein Yadoi Maseges. Our learning today should be a schos for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayom Ubein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Alehem V'Yetziei Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala Uvizman Kariv V'Noimar Amen. So, here in Reish Samach Gimel, we've been learning the halachas of Hadlakas Neiros Shabbos, the chiyuv, the obligation to have Neiros lit for Shabbos. We explained that this mitzvah is placed more on women, like the Mechaber said in the beginning of Sif Gimel, Hanoshim Musharois by Yoiser. This is a chiyuv that is placed more on women than on men. The Mechaber said it's because, just practically, they are Mitzuyas Babayas, the Mili de Besa, the needs of the house, are placed more in the realm of the woman than on the men, and therefore Hadlakas Neiros Shabbos, which is for Shalom Bayis, so that people shouldn't be tripping and stumbling around, so that there should be a peaceful, happy, uplifting ambiance and environment in the house. We have Neiros Shabbos. That is something that's placed more on the women. We also saw other reasons. A woman, by eating from the Eitz Hadas and giving from the Eitz Hadas to Adam HaRishon, she was mechaba Neiros shel olam. She dimmed and somewhat extinguished the Ner of the world, because all of the neshamas that came into the world were all bound up in the neshama of Adam HaRishon. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. So Adam HaRishon was called the Ner of Hashem by giving from the Eitz Hadas to Adam HaRishon that brought Misa into the world. So the woman was mechabe. She somewhat extinguished the Neiros shel olam. She's mesakin this by doing the mitzvah of Hadlakas Neiros on Shabbos. We're continuing on this theme now. Let's pick up Lamed Hey Amid Beis near the end of the bottom line. Says the Mechaber, Im ein yadai maseges liknois ner l'Shabbos u'likiddush hayom. If a person has very limited financial resources. Now, we saw earlier, the Mechaber told us that even somebody who's ein lo mayoichal, even somebody who does not have food on his own, so he's being supported by tzedakah. The Kupa Shel Ir, the community chest, is going to give him his food for Shabbos. He needs to go the extra mile, and he has to be mechazer al psachim. He has to go knock on doors if he has to see to it that he should be able to buy a ner for Ner Shabbos. Now the Mechaber discusses over here, and he says, how about somebody, Im ein yodai maseges liknois ner l'Shabbos u'likiddush hayom. Somebody has very, very limited financial resources. He doesn't have enough money to buy a ner for Neiros shel Shabbos and to buy yayin, to buy wine for Kiddush hayom. So now he has to make a choice over here. Which one should he buy? Says the Mechaber, Im ein yodai maseges liknois ner l'Shabbos u'likiddush hayom, Ner Shabbos koidem. Then Ner Shabbos comes first. Before you go ahead and you buy yayin l'kiddush, go ahead and buy a ner for Ner Shabbos. V'chein, similarly, says the Mechaber, another choice. Im ein yodai maseges liknois ner l'Shabbos, the ner l'Chanukah. Let's say again, you have over here a choice. You have limited financial resources. You have enough money that you could buy a ner for Shabbos, but Chanukah is on Shabbos, and you have a choice. Should I buy Ner Shabbos or should I buy Ner Chanukah? Says the Mechaber, Ner Shabbos koidem. Ner Shabbos comes first. Why? Mishum Shalom Abayis. Because of the peace of the house. De'ein Shalom Abayis b'lo ner. There's not going to be peace and happiness in the house if there's no ner. If there's no ner, people are going to be stumbling around, they're going to be tripping, they're going to be stubbing their toe, they're not going to be able to find the things that they need to find. It's not going to be a peaceful, happy home if there's no ner, and therefore Ner Shabbos is going to become before Ner Chanukah. Ner Shabbos is going to come before Kiddush. Now we're going to have to see what that means. I keep on saying it comes before yayin lekiddush. It comes before buying wine for kiddush. We'll expand upon this in the Mishnah Berurah. The Ramah says now, "Ve'im ein yodai maseges liknois yayin lekiddush v'liknois ner Chanukah." If you don't have enough funds to be able to purchase wine for kiddush and ner Chanukah, so now ner Shabbos you already have. Now your choice is, do I take my next financial resources, do I use them for Ner Chanukah, or do I use them for Kiddush? Ayin Likamon, Siman Tuf Reish, Ayin Chesef Aleph, Mitzvah Hashem Yisbarach. We'll discuss that in Hilchas Chanukah, in Siman Tuf Reish, Ayin Ches. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. So we have to begin on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph with Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Gimel. So the first choice that the Mechaber gave us over here was a choice between Ner Shabbos and Kiddush. Which one comes first? Ner Shabbos or Kiddush? Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'af agav de Kiddush daraisa. Hold it. Kiddush hayoim l'chayr is a chiyuv daraisa. Now it's very nice that Neiros Shabbos is Shalom Bayis, but Neiros Shabbos is not more than a darabanan, and Kiddush is a daraisa. So how are you telling me that Ner Shabbos comes before a chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush hayoim? So says the Mishnah Berurah, V'af agav the Kiddush daraisa, even though Kiddush is a chiyuv daraisa, mikamakam al hayayin darabanan. The idea of making Kiddush hayoim al hayayin, that's a darabanan. When it comes to being yoitza, the chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush, you could be yoitza that in Shemoneh Esrei. You say Vayichulu in Shemoneh Esrei, and now you're mekayim the mitzvah daraisa of Kiddush hayoim. And furthermore, we're talking about a person over here who has pas. Because if you remember in the previous year, in Mishnah Berurah's Cotton Test in Siv Beis, we said that somebody who mamish doesn't have what to eat and he's not getting anything from the community chest, so he's got to go around and knock on doors and beg. What should he ask for first? We said the first thing that he has to ask for is pas. The first thing he has to ask for is pas, to be able to make a Suda Shabbos, to be able to be Mekadesh ala Pas. So certainly Pas is going to come first. So says the Mishnah Berurah, when the Mechaber says over here that if you have a choice between Kiddush Hayoim and Ner Shabbos, he doesn't mean that you're not going to be Yoitze Kiddush Hayoim. Either you're going to be Yoitze Kiddush Hayoim in Tefillah, or you're going to be Yoitze Kiddush Hayoim with your Pas, and you're going to make Kiddush ala Pas. V'oid ha'yachal lekadesh al hapas. Ois Katan Yodalid, the tremendous chashivus of Neiros Shabbos is Mishum Shalom Habayis, because Neiros Shabbos are necessary for Shalom Bayis. And again, I keep on saying, we're so used to that catchphrase of Shalom Bayis, meaning Shalom Bein Ish LeIshtoi, between husband and wife. Over here, it doesn't necessarily mean Shalom Bayis between husband and wife. It means Poshet Shalom Bayis, the peace in the household. If you have a dark household, it's not going to be peaceful. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Remember that when we're talking here about somebody who has such scant financial resources, and we're discussing the tough choices that he has to make, what to give preference to and what to give precedence to, realize the im yesh lo ner echad sagi. When we say that somebody should first spend his meager resources on Neiros Shabbos, but to be mekayim the chiyuv of Neiros Shabbos, you only really need one ner. Even the idea of two Neiros is only a minig because of Zachar v'Shamar, but you don't need two Neiros, you only need Ner Echad. V'yotzi ha'moiser l'Kiddush or l'Ner Chanukah, and then whatever you have left over, if you buy one candle or one oil lamp for Ner Shabbos, then go ahead and divert it to the next order of precedence. Use it either for Yayin l'Kiddush, or if you're talking about on Chanukah, use it for Ner Chanukah. V'gam l'Chanukah m'Ner Echad sagi, and also when it comes to Chanukah, really the Iker Chiyuv of Neiros Chanukah, you only need one Ner. Now let's say it's Shabbos Chanukah, and you have enough money, you have your pas, and now you have a Ner Echad l'Shabbos, and you have enough money for a Ner Echad l'Chanukah, and now you have a little extra money. What should you do with that extra money? Nirali, the Mishnah Berurah says it would appear to him, the toiv yoiser liknois oid Neiros Chanukah. It would be better to use the next resources that you have to buy additional Neiros Chanukah. So if it's the third night of Chanukah, so really, make radin, you could be yoitzer with one Ner Chanukah. But you spent money already on one Ner for Shabbos. You spent money on one Ner Chanukah. You have your pas for Suda Shabbos, for Kiddush Hayoim. Now you have a little more money. It's the third night of Chanukah. Buy another 2 Neiros to be Yoitza Mahadrin min Mahadrin, Liyos min Mahadrin. U'kamoisha b'yarti b'bir halacha. Kasav HaMagen Avram, the Magen Avram writes an interesting halacha. The Isha Suma, a woman that's blind, Gam Kein Yechoyle Levarech al Ner Shabbos, she could light Neiros Shabbos, and she could do it with a bracha, despite the fact that she can't see the Neiros. Tahanenes Gam Kein Mehama'oros, because she is going to have Hana from the Shabbos licht. Why is she going to have Hana from the Shabbos licht? Because in a household that's lit up, people could lead her around. They could lead her. They could tell her, oh, be careful, don't trip over this, don't trip over that, come to the table. But if it's pitch black in the house, then not only is she blind, you're going to have the blind leading the blind. So that's why a woman who's blind, she can make a bracha on Neiros Shabbos because she's having Hana from the Neiros. Umiyu, however, says the Mishnah Berurah, Im yesh la baal shehu pikeach, but if she has a husband who Baruch Hashem could see, hu yivarech, it would be better that he should make the bracha. Because again, let's remember the previous year. The chiyuv of adlakas Neiros Shabbos is on men and women. It's not a woman's mitzvah. If a man is living alone, he has a chiyuv of adlakas Neiros Shabbos. Nashim muzharos yoiser. We give it over more to the women than to the men. But like this, the man and the woman both have a chiyuv of adlakas Neiros Shabbos. So now you have a choice. You have a woman who's a suma, never she's blind. So the only hana that she's having from the Neiros is a secondary hana of people leading her around. But you have a man in the house who also carries a chiyuv, and he could mamish be nene from the Neiros. Then better he should taka make the bracha. V'maycheles b'shulchan echad im acherim sheberchu v'hidliku. Now let's say you have a case where there are many people together in the same house. So now you're going to have multiple people lighting Neiros for Shabbos. Now the truth is, whenever you have multiple people lighting Neiros together on Shabbos, right away we have to question, how does each woman make an independent bracha? L'chara, once there are Neiros in the house, so as far as Shalom Bayis is concerned, once there are Neiros in the house, so what do additional Neiros accomplish? So if you have 10 women lighting together, the first woman goes ahead, she lights 2 Neiros. As far as the Shalom Bayis of the house is concerned, the house is already lit up. How's the next woman now coming and lighting Neiros with a bracha? What is the need for those Neiros so much that it should allow a woman to make a bracha and be Motzei Shem Shamayim in a bracha? To be madlik on these Neiros, which seem to be superfluous. Now we're going to see that the answer to that question, indeed, there is a shita we're going to see that holds that when you have multiple people lighting together, only one should light with a bracha. We don't paskin that way. But the ones that say, the way we're noyig, that everyone does make a bracha, is because even though it's true that when it comes to Shalom Bayis, once you have one Ner or one set of Neiros lit in the house, you already accomplished Shalom Bayis. But the truth is that there is greater simcha in the ribui of the Neiros. So since there's additional and greater simcha from the ribui of the Neiros, each woman could make another bracha because she's being marbe Neiros. So that's when you have regular women who could see, and there are multiple people lighting. Each one could make a bracha because there's additional simcha. But now let's analyze this in the context of a woman who's blind. The woman who's blind, we said the reason she could light with the bracha is because somebody else could lead her around. Now the truth is, if she's lighting and 10 other women are lighting, once the first woman lights, anybody who needs to lead this blind woman around is going to be able to. They have light. So as far as that hana is concerned, the blind woman is not getting any additional hana from the addition of her ner, or her 2 Neiros. So that hana would not allow her to make an independent bracha. She's not really being nene. What other hana is there? There's the hana of the ribui simcha. There's greater simcha because the house is more lit up. That's not negated to a blind woman. A blind woman doesn't have a ribui simcha from the fact that there's additional light in the house. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, if a blind woman is eating together with other people, sheberchu, who are making brachas, v'hidliku, and they're lighting neiros, light tavarich, she cannot make another bracha. The only reason all the other people are allowed to make their own individual brachas is mishum simcha yisera sheyesh al yidei riboy neiros, is because of the additional simcha that's brought about by the additional neiros. That additional simcha of the additional neiros is b'chlal not negeya to the blind woman who can't see the light and can't enjoy that light. The only unknown she has is the ability of other people to lead her around, and that was already accomplished once the first woman lit. So she can't light with a bracha. Now, I want to give a word of caution. I usually give this word of caution before we learn such a Mishnah Berurah, but now I'm going to do it post facto. There is a certain amount of temptation. You're listening to a shir, you're learning these halachas, and you think to yourself, this is not so negated to me, because what's the Mishnah we're talking about? First, we're talking about somebody who's mamish living with such dachkus. He's living in such poverty that he has to make these choices. Should I spend money on one Shabbos ner, or should I spend money on a revius of yayin l'kiddush? And now I have a little bit extra money. Baruch Hashem, by and large, we don't know from such poverty. No one should ever know of such a nisayon of such poverty. Now we're talking about a blind woman. Okay, Baruch Hashem, most people nowadays don't have this. So people tend to look at it and say, okay, this is not so negay, I could breeze right through it. Never, ever, 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 chas v'chalila, should you think that way. There have been too many stories that I'm aware of, where people had that kind of machshava when they learned these kind of halachas that have to do with terrible situations, and they thought that they could skip over it because it's not so negeya, and then unfortunately, it became negeya to them. So never have such a machshava. Every ois of Torah is negeya. You never know the shaila you might ask. You never know what situation you might end up in. So everything is negeya. There's no such thing as something that is not negeya. Let's go weiter. Sif Dalid, third line down in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber. So we have learned that you could be Mekabel Shabbos once you hit Plag HaMincha. That's the earliest time that you could be Mekabel Shabbos. If you try to be Mekabel Shabbos before Plag HaMincha, you get up, boy, Rishalom Ateres Bala Gamber Idu Tzala, boy Challah Shabbos Malchus. I'm being Mekabel Shabbos. Your Kabbalah Shabbos is ineffective. It doesn't do anything if you're Mekabel Shabbos before Plag HaMincha. Before Plag HaMincha is completely day. It is day l'chol hadayis. It's Erev Shabbos. You can't be Mekadesh it. You can't be Mekabel Shabbos on Sunday. You can't be Mekabel Shabbos on Sunday. You can't be Mekabel Shabbos on Monday. You can't be Mekabel Shabbos on Friday. You can be Mekabel Shabbos after Plag HaMincha, because after Plag HaMincha, we're already going down towards evening. We're already going down to Shabbos. According to some, it's already night. You can have a Ma'ariv. You can say Kriya Shema according to Rabbi Yehuda after Plag HaMincha. So after Plag HaMincha, you can make an effective Kabbalah Shabbos. But before Plag HaMincha, you can't be a Mekabel Shabbos. That's one fact that you need to remember going into Sif Daled. Another fact that you need to know going into Sif Daled is we, according to the way we paskin and according to our minhagim, we always equate Hadlokas Neiros Shabbos with Kabbalah Shabbos. A woman lights Neiros Shabbos, she was Kabbalah Shabbos. Oh, Mami lit already. For Mami, it's already Shabbos. Tati, it's not Shabbos yet. It's 20 minutes to Shkia, whatever it is. He wasn't Kabbalah Shabbos yet. It's Zman Tesefer Shabbos, but he wasn't Kabbalah Shabbos yet. It's not Shabbos yet. But we always equate Hadlokas Neiros with Kabbalah Shabbos. But really, there is nothing inherent in Hadlokas Neiros Shabbos that makes Kabbalah Shabbos. You make a bracha, you have a chiyuv to light Neiros for Shabbos. Obviously, lighting Neiros Havara is an Issa Malacha that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So obviously, you have to do it before Kabbalah Shabbos, right? And there's nothing inherent in that lighting that brings about Kabbalah Shabbos. Now, we're going to see, according to the way we pass it, according to Amin Hagim, yes, a woman lights Hadlokas Neiros. The default is that by lighting Hadlokas Neiros for Shabbos, she makes a bracha, and she mentions Shabbos, she's Mekabel Shabbos by default. But inherently, there is nothing inherent in Hadlokas Neiros Shabbos that necessarily equals Kabbalah Shabbos. The Mechaber is going to talk about here about a woman or a man who went to light Neiros Shabbos, but she did it early And she didn't have in mind Kabbalah Shabbos. B'chlal not. She had in mind that she's going to do malacha after she light Shabbos. So why did she light Neiros now? I don't know. She has a hang-up. She wants to make sure she's not going to forget to light. So she went ahead and she lit early. But she lit early without Kabbalah Shabbos. And obviously she lit at a time that is roi for Kabbalah Shabbos. So she lit after Plag. So this woman or man went ahead and lit Neiros Shabbos after Plag HaMincha, but quite a while before Shabbos. And the lighting was done without Bichlal having das for Kabbalah Shabbos. Maybe even it was done with das not to be Makabal Shabbos. So now the Mechaber is going to say that brings about a problem. The problem is that by doing that lighting, it's Bichlal not nicker that lighting was done l'kavod Shabbos. Therefore, says the Mechaber, you should not do this. Says the Mechaber in the beginning here in Sif Daled, Lo yagdim lemaher lahadlikoi ba'oid hayom gadol. Don't go ahead and light Neiros Shabbos early in the day. Now, what does early in the day mean? Obviously, early in the day means after Plag. Before Plag, there's no conversation here. So it means after Plag. But it means a long time before Shabbos. We're going to learn a biur halacha inside to get into the weeds of this. But, says the Mechaber, don't light early. Sha'az ein nicker shemadlika l'kavod Shabbos. Because that is b'chlal not nicker that you're doing this l'kavod Shabbos. V'gam, and furthermore, lo ya'acher. Don't light late. What does that mean, don't light late? Don't light the instant before Shabbos. Because if you go to light Neiros the instant before Shabbos, you know what you might chas v'chalila do? You might end up lighting ben hashmoshes. Havara, is it daraisa, ben hashmoshes? Not allowed to do that. So says the Mechaber, don't light early, don't light late. But, says the Mechaber, ve'em roitza lahadlik ner ba'oid hayom gadol. But if you do want to light early, again, after Plag, u'lekabel of Shabbos miyad, and when you light, you're going to be Makabel Shabbos, Rashoy, that you're allowed to do. The problem is when you light early without Kabbalah Shabbos. If you light early, and then after you light, you go ahead, you're cooking, you're making the potato kugel, you're finishing up this, you're finishing up that, you vacuum the floor. So then, what's the Kavod Shabbos here? You didn't light the Kavod Shabbos. But if you light early, after Plag, and you're Makabel Shabbos, that's okay. You lit, and you were Makabel Shabbos, then it's very nicker that it's the Kavod Shabbos. Ki kevan shemakabel of Shabbos miyad, ein zu hakdama. Since you're being Makabel Shabbos when you light, that's not called lighting early. You're lighting when you're Makabel Shabbos. But it has to be after Plag, which is when Shu Shah Raviyah Kaidam Alayla. Plag is an hour and a quarter, an hour and 15 minutes before night. Okay, so that's the Mechaber. Now let's get into the weeds a little bit. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah before we do the biur halacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Tezvav. The Mechaber said, do not light ba'oid hayom gadol. Hainu kishu zman harbe koidem toisefes Shabbos. What does this mean? Ba'oid hayom gadol, early in the day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what it means is a lot of time before the zman of toisefes Shabbos. So let's remind ourselves what we learned earlier. We're going to talk now in the language of the Mechaber. That means we're talking in the language of Rabbeinu Tam. So let's just very quickly remember, language of Rabbeinu Tam. What we call shkia, the Rabbeinu Tam calls tchilas shkia. Really, tchilas shkia doesn't mean anything. There's no halachic status. Nothing changes after this tchilas shkia. It doesn't become ben hashmoshes, according to Rabbeinu Tam. So there's tchila shkia, which is what we call shkia. For the next 58 and a half minutes, according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's vaday yoim. Then comes soif hashkia. 58 and a half minutes after shkia becomes the end of shkia, which marks the beginning of bein hashmoshes. 13 and a half minutes later, tzeisak echavim is vaday laila. We learned earlier that in the world of the Mechaber, you have a chiyuv of Tosefes Shabbos. You have to be moisef mechayil ala Kiddush. What's the time period that you use for Tosefes Shabbos? You could use the time period between Tchila Shkia, between what we call Shkia, and Soif HaShkia. Those 58 and a half minutes are the time period that you're allowed to use for Tosefes Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, when the Mechaber says over here, don't light early, what the Mechaber means when he says don't light very early, he means don't light a long time before the Zman of Tosefes Shabbos. Now, most people did not use the whole 58.5 minutes from Tchila Shkia to Sof Shkia for Tosefes Shabbos. Most people lit 15 or 20 minutes early. So they lit 15 or 20 minutes before Sof HaShkia. That's when they lit. They didn't light, in the world of the Mechaber, they didn't light a minute after Shkia. That's not when they lit. So when the Mechaber says over here, in his world, according to Rabbeinu Tam, when the Mechaber says, Lo yagdim l'maher, lahadlik ba'oid hayom gadol, don't light very early, what he means is, don't light a long time before the typical time for Tosefes Shabbos. Don't do that. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Hainu kuju zman harbe koydem Tosefes Shabbos. Uzman Tosefes Shabbos la Shulchan Aruch hu ma'at koydem Sof HaShkia. What's the typical time of Tosefes Shabbos according to the Shulchan Aruch? A little bit before the Sof HaShkia. So Sof HaShkia is 58.5 minutes after Shkia. The Zman of Tosefes Shabbos is maybe 40 minutes after Shkia. Don't light earlier than that. V'ayin b'Biur Halacha, and take a look at the Biur Halacha, where we're going to discuss this in greater length, and I want to see that Biur Halacha inside. But continues the Mishnah Berurah, V'ayin b'Siman Reish Samach Aleph b'Mishnah Berurah Sifkat and Chav Gimel Damaskinin and Sham, where we paskined over there, the Misha Pirish Atzmai Mi Malacha Chatzi Shah, somebody who stops doing Malacha a half hour, or I'll call upon him Shlisha, or at least a third of an hour, 20 minutes, Koydem Ashkia, Ashrei Loi, he's fortunate to Yoitza B'Zeh Yidei Kol Rishonim. Now, let's take a look here in the Biur Halacha. Biur Halacha Dibur HaMaschil Ba'oid Hayom Gadol. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Who Brisa Shabbos Chav Gimel Amud Beis. This is based on a Brisa in Masechta Shabbos Chav Gimel Amud Beis. The Tanina Sham, we learned that a Brisa over there. Ubelvad Shalo Yakdim V'Shalo Ya'acher. You should not light early. You should not light late. V'Hakdama Nikra. Lighting early is called. That's when you light a lot before the typical time for Tosefes Shabbos. And we're going to explain that in greater detail. V'ichor, lighting late, Nikra, is called when you light exactly before Shabbos. And what's the problem with that? If you try to light, punkt, right at the Zman of Tosefes Shabbos, you might end up lighting late, and Chas v'Chalila, coming to Chilul Shabbos. Uzman Tosefes. Now, when we talk about the Zman of Tosefes Shabbos, let's remember, Hu Tali Ba'ashli Ravravi. This is Tali in a major machlokes. Deladas HaShulchan Aruch Le'el B'Siman Reish Samach Aleph Sif Beis. In the world of the Mechaber, the world of Rabbeinu Tam, what's the Zman of Tosefes Shabbos? Hu Ma'at Koydem Sof HaShkia. That's a little bit before what the Rabbeinu Tam calls Sof HaShkia. A little bit before the beginning of Bein Hashmashos, which is 13.5 minutes before Tzeis, or 58.5 minutes after our Shkia. But if you light a long time before that, Hu Bichlal Loy Yaktim. That goes into this halacha of the Mechaber, when the Mechaber says don't light very early. Even if you're within Rabbeinu Tam's 72 minutes. So that means, when the Mechaber says don't light early, he means even after our Shkia. Right? After our Shkia is within 72 minutes of Tzeis. Really, you're allowed to use all of that time. From a minute after Shkia, according to the Mechaber, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you already could use that time for Tosefes Shabbos. But if you light then, without Kabbalah Shabbos, that's called lighting too early. Even though the Mechaber said earlier, even though you're allowed to use the entire 72 minutes from Shkia until Tzeis HaKechavim for Kabbalah Shabbos, so for Tosefes Shabbos, you're Mekayim the mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos if you Kabbalah Shabbos a minute after Shkia. So how are you telling me now that you shouldn't light early? You shouldn't light a minute after Shkia? Why not? I could use that time for Tosefes Shabbos. Yes, that's true. If you're Mekabel Shabbos. Yes, you could be Mekayim your mitzvah of being Moisif Michael ala Kiddush a minute after Shkia, according to Rabbeinu Tam. But that's if you're Mekabel Shabbos. That's what the Mechaber meant when he said, yes, you could use all of those 72 minutes, according to the Rabbeinu Tam, for Tosefes Shabbos. That means, yes, you could be Makabel Shabbos a minute after Shkia and use it for Teisef Shabbos. And if you do that, you could light then too. Like the Mechaber says, if you're Makabel Shabbos, you could light, even though it's early. But we're talking here, but here in Sif Daled we're talking about, over here when the Mechaber says don't light early, he means if you're lighting without Kabbalah Shabbos, you're going to light and then you're going to go vacuum the floor. That's when there's a problem of lo yaktim, because it's not nicker that it's covered Shabbos. But you want to light and be Makabel Shabbos? Go ahead. Now this was all in the world of Rabbeinu Tam. But according to the Gra and the Goinim, the Metchilas HaShkia Huzman Ben Hashmoshes, according to the way we paskin, Shkia, after Shkia, a minute after Shkia is already Ben Hashmoshes. Teisef Shabbos is before Shkia. So how do we apply this halacha of the Mechaber lo yaktim? So then, according to the Goinim, Lodasa Goinim, the Metchilas HaShkia Huzman Ben Hashmoshes, Im Kain Zman Teisefes Huzman Mud Kaidem Lozeh. So then the typical time for Teisef Shabbos is, let's say, 15 minutes before Shkia. That's the Zman of Teisef Shabbos. Now, you want to light a half hour before Shkia? Even though it's after Plag, you want to light a half hour before Shkia without Kabbalah Shabbos? That would be being over this halacha of Sif Daled, you're lighting too early. The Kavanas Abrais, the Layaktim, whose man harbe koidem lozman zeh. The Chol zeh b'shaloi kibel of Shabbos b'hadlaka, but this is all only germane in a very weird case, where you're lighting Neiros without being Makabel Shabbos. Dainu shaloi badal as atzmai mi malacha achar hadlaka, where you're not stopping malacha after hadlaka. Aval b'kibel of Shabbos, yuchel lahaktem plag mincha. You want to be Makabel Shabbos? Yes, your wife could light a minute after Plag, if she's being Makabel Shabbos. This whole halacha is only germane, a very weird case. Somebody wants to light Neiros after Plag, a long time before the Zman of Teisef Shabbos. So again, in our world, we say like the Gra, that Ben Hashmoshes begins right after Shkia. The Zman of Teisef Shabbos is 15 or 20 minutes before Shkia. Plag HaMincha is an hour and 15 minutes before Shkia. So you want to be Makabel Shabbos 45 minutes before, you want to do Adlakas Neiros 45 minutes before Shkia without Kabbalah Shabbos. That you can't do. That's lo yaktim, because it's not nicker that you're doing it lecovered Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, ois katan tezayin. The other halacha that the Mechaber said over here from the Brisa is not only you shouldn't light early, you shouldn't light late. Ois katan tezayin lo ya'acher. Hainu heichashu madlik b'tzimtzum b'sayv zman hamuter. Don't light exactly at the last minute. So in our world, where Shkia marks the beginning of Ben Hashmoshes, after Shkia you're not allowed to light. Don't light a minute before Shkia. You're a fool if you do that. Because then you might end up lighting late and being Mechal Shabbos. Where the Mishnah Berurah spoke about the woman who comes home very late from the store and she's going and taking a shower and this and that. The Mishnah Berurah said the husband should go light. Chas v'chalila, the woman might come to be Mechal Shabbos. But if you want to light early, Ulekabel of Shabbos, you want to be Mekabel Shabbos, go ahead, light as early as you want, after Plag. But that means that you're going to light after Plag, you're going to be Mekabel Shabbos, and that's it. You're not doing any malacha. You're not even going to do Isurei D'Rabbanan, even if they're L'tzarech Mitzvah, if you're being Mekabel Shabbos with a tzibur. The Mechaber said, what is Plag HaMincha? Plag HaMincha is an hour and 15 minutes before Shkia. But before Plag, Kabbalah Shabbos is not efficacious at all. It's meaningless. Mishnah Berurah. Ois katan yotes halayla, Plag halayla. Hainu tseis shloisha kechavim. Plag HaMincha is an hour and 15 minutes before night. What's night? Tseis. Hainu tseis shloisha kechavim. What do we call tseis? That means when 3 medium-sized stars become visible. V'das halavush v'hagra. Now, the Mechaber was talking in the world of the Rabbeinu Tam. But das halavush v'hagra, the Plag HaMincha hu sha'u revia kaidem hashkia. They hold that plag is an hour and 15 minutes before Shkia, not an hour and 15 minutes before Tzeis. But whether you're talking in the world of the Gra or the world of Rabbeinu Tam, when we say the plag mincha is an hour and 15 minutes before Tzeis, or before Shkia, we're always using proportionate hours where you divide the day into 12 equal parts. The psak of the Mechaber is we divide the day into 12 equal parts, but how do we measure the day? We measure the day from Alois, from dawn until Tzeis. According to the Gra and the Lavush, we measure the day Mizrichas HaShemesh ad Shkia from Netz until Shkia, and we divide that time into 12 equal parts. Ois Katan Chaf, Mi Ba'oid Yaim. Oh, no, we didn't do this yet. Says the Ramah. Okay, bottom line here, Lamed Vav, Amud Aleph. Let's take a look at the Ramah. Says the Ramah. Hago. V'ayin l'kaman Siman Reish Samach Zayin Sif Beis. First, the Ramah just points us to Siman Reish Samach Zayin, which we'll learn soon, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, which is where the Mechaber paskins that you could daven Ma'ariv on Erev Shabbos, Friday night, and you could eat your Suda, you could make Kiddush, you could do everything after Plag. That's why the Ramah points us here to Reish Samach Zayin Sif Beis. Then says the Ramah another halacha. V'hemahaya haner daluk mi ba'oid yoyim hagadol. The Mechaber just said you can't light very early without Kabbalah Shabbos. Says the Ramah, what if you had your ner lit, taka, very early? And the Mishnah Berurah is going to say this means that you didn't even have it lit really for Shabbos purposes. You had the ner lit. Oh, the ner is already burning. Could I go ahead and just make a bracha and use it for Neiros Shabbos? Says the Ramah, no. Yechabenu, you should extinguish it, you should put it out. V'yachzar v'yad likenu l'tzeres Shabbos, and then you should go ahead and relight it for Shabbos purposes. Says the Mishnah Berurah back on Lamed Vav, Amud Aleph, Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chaf. Mi ba'oid hayoyim gadol. If the ner was lit early, afilu im haya achar plag mincha. This doesn't necessarily mean, you see, if the ner was lit, your husband, we learned earlier that the husband should be mesakein the Neiros. Since the husband also has a chelik in this mitzvah of adlakas Neiros, it is appropriate that the husband should set up the Neiros. I light the Neiros and then blow them out. I try to do it early in the morning just because it's Friday morning. I'm busy with Sarkei Shabbos. One of the things I do is I set up the lichter. So what happens if I set up the lichter, I lit the lichter, and then I got a phone call and I walked away. And now I forgot to put them out. Now I did it 11 o'clock in the morning. I have very big candles or a lot of olive oil. Now my wife comes by Zman Hadlaka, and guess what? The Neiros are already burning. But I lit the Neiros way before Plag. So over there it's very easy to understand the idea that you need to blow out the Neiros and relight them, because this Hadlakas Neiros had absolutely nothing to do with Shabbos. It wasn't even done during a time period that's roi for Hadlakas Neiros. It was done before Plag. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Afilu im hayachar plag mincha. Even if your husband went ahead and lit the Neiros after Plag. Umayri, we're talking about here, show you dolok l'inyan acher. Plag wasn't lit for Shabbos. Avalim hu hidlik l'tzari Shabbos. But let's say you were over on the Mechaber's halacha of Sif Daled. What does that mean? It was 10 minutes after Plag, and a woman decided she wants to go do Hadlakas Neiros for Shabbos. She wants to go do Hadlakas Neiros for Shabbos. This woman decided. She wants to light early, but she's not being Mekabel Shabbos. So that's in direct contravention of the Mechaber's halacha of Sif Daled. She was over on the halacha of Lo Yakdim. 10 minutes after Plag, she went, she made a bracha, she lit the Neiros, and then she walked away. And now she's going and vacuuming the floor because she wasn't Mekabel Shabbos. So she did in contravention of this halacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval, im hidlik l'tzar Shabbos. If the hadlaka was done for Shabbos purposes, av shaloi kibel alav Shabbos b'adlakasai, but she wasn't Mekabel Shabbos when she lit, so it's, again, in direct contravention of the halacha of Sif Daled, mikamokem ein tzarich lechaboisai. Then she does not have to extinguish it and relight it. After lechatchil loy hoy loy lahadlik, even though she should not have done this, after lechatchil loy hoy loy lahadlik kol kach mikoidim, sheina nikar shemadlikin l'tzar Shabbos, now it wasn't nikar that she lit l'kavet Shabbos, mikamokem b'di'evet shaper dami. But if she did it b'di'evid, it works. V'ayin b'bi'er halacha. Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the bi'er halacha. Let's look at that bi'er halacha. Lamed vav amud aleph bi'er halacha dibra maskel mi ba'oid yom. So what's the case over here? The case over here is, again, a woman went ahead, or a man, I'm not picking on women, somebody went ahead and did in direct contravention of the Mechaber's halacha of Reish Samach Gimel Sif Dalet. You went after Plaga Mincha, but a long time before the Zman of Tisef Shabbos. So 5 minutes after Plag, a woman went ahead, or a man went ahead, made a bracha, lit Shabbos Neiros, having das not to be Makabel Shabbos. Just, I want to make sure I don't forget Neiros Shabbos. So she went and she lit for Shabbos. And now she's making a potato kugel, she's vacuuming the floor. Now her husband or somebody else, whatever it is, somebody comes and says, what do you do? You were over on halacha, lo yagdim. It's a beferish brisa, it's a beferish mechaber. Reis samagil sif daled, lo yagdim. Oh, I'll go ahead, I'll put it out, I'll light again. No. You weren't allowed to do it, but b'di'eved, you lit after plag. B'di'eved, it's a good lighting. The lighting works. Says the bi'er halacha, but I want to be machmir. No, I realized that I blew it. I realized that I went against the halacha Reis samagil sif daled. So I want to go ahead and I want to be machmir. I want to put them out and I want to light again. Says the bi'er halacha, no, you can't do that. Says the bi'er halacha, ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, v'hu mechadushe Rabbi Akiva Eiger, v'av shabal derech achayim lo kosav kein, v'kamokai mistaber taimik agon Rabbi Akiva Eiger. It's mistaber, like Rabbi Akiva Eiger, that once you lit, b'di'eved, even though you weren't allowed to light then, you weren't supposed to light then, but b'di'eved, it works. Why? Why is it mistaber like this, Rabbi Akiva Eiger? Remember, this all comes from one brisa. The same brisa says lo yakdim, don't light early, and lo ya'acher, don't light late. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the lo yakdim hainu rak lechatchila, domio the lo ya'acher to have a rak lechatchila. The halacha that you shouldn't light a minute before the zman is only lechatchila. B'di'eved, if you did light a minute before the zman, certainly it works. You lit Neiros Shabbos, and it's nicker that it was L'Kavod Shabbos because you did it right before the Zman. L'chatchila, we tell you, don't be a fool. Don't wait to light Neiros to a minute before Shkia. You're a fool. You're pushing yourself to the last minute. What happens if your clock is wrong? You're going to be Mechal Shabbos. Or what happens if you get distracted for a minute and you end up lighting a minute after Shkia? So don't be a fool, L'chatchila. Light 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 18 minutes before Shkia. Don't light at the last minute. But that's only L'chatchila. So the other halacha in the brisa, lo yakdim, don't light too early because it's not nicker that it's the L'Kavod Shabbos. That also means only lechatchila. But b'di'eved, if you did it, it works. Says the Mishnah Berurah. That's what Rabbi Akiva Eiger says. Rabbi Akiva says if you lit early, b'di'eved, it works. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Chavetz Chaim, it's mistaber because of this svara. Devarak lechatchila. Now says the bi'er halacha, v'em nirtze lahachmir. Somebody went ahead, lit with a bracha too early, without Kabbalah Shabbos. Now he wants to be machmir, lechabos. He wants to go put it out, v'lachzor lahadlik, and he wants to light again. Kedei shetiyah hadlaka bizmana, so that he should light at the proper time, v'lo yaver al lo yakdim. He realizes he was over on the halach of Sif Dalet. He doesn't want to be over on the halach of Sif Dalet, so he wants to put it out and light again. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yatsa Scharai B'Hefsedai. You can't do that. Whatever gain you're going to get by doing that is going to be lost in the negative. Because now you're making your original bracha levatala. You went ahead 10 minutes after Plaga Mincha. You made a bracha, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu lahadlik Neiros Shabbos. You went ahead and you lit, and then you put it out before Shabbos. So that means that your original bracha was a bracha levatala. Yes, now you're going to have to relight, and now you're going to make a new bracha. Your second bracha won't be a bracha levatala. It'll probably be a bracha shein tzricha, but it won't be a bracha levatala. You're causing a bracha shein tzricha, but you're making your first bracha levatala. So yes, you did something in contravention of halacha. You lit too early in contravention of Reis Samach Gimel Siv Daled, but you cannot go ahead and be machmir and try to be misakin it now by putting out the Neiros and lighting again. Because by putting out the Neiros, you're causing that your original bracha was a bracha levatala. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem should send Yeshuas, Efuas, Parnasa, Sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias Goel Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.